Welcome to the deep dive. You are here for the shortcut. We take that massive stack of source material, all the articles, the confessions, and we distill it down to the unforgettable facts, the core insight, and yeah, the truly jaw-dropping narrative moments.
That's right.
And today we are taking on a legend that just refused to die. It's a saga that begins in the gaslit, tragic romance of 19th century France. And then, it just violently shunts straight into the thunderous, hyper-capitalist roar of the American Gilded Age.
It's such a jarring shift. Our listener, the learner, has given us this deep stack of sources. We've got character confessions, private journals, cynical press reports,
Right.
all of it dealing with one central, really irresistible question. What on earth happened to the Phantom of the Opera after he vanished from the catacombs of Paris?
Exactly. And the material we have, it paints this incredibly vivid picture of a continuation. This is Frederick Forsyth's sequel to the timeless classic that takes our tragic hero, known now by his birth name, Erik, from the shadowy vaults beneath the Opera Garnier to the blinding, cutthroat sunlight of Manhattan in 1906. So our mission today is to trace his almost unbelievable transformation. We're going to focus intently on motivations that drove him, the specific American setting that allowed him to flourish, and the shattering final revelations that forced him to confront the consequences of, his obsession.
And the sources themselves, they're structured brilliantly. They kind of mimic the investigative format of the original book by giving us these multiple, often highly personal and sometimes contradictory perspectives on the central mystery.
Right.
So we'll be piecing together accounts from the woman who knew him best, the mistress of the ballet, Antoinette Giry.
Her confession is just incredible.
It's the key. And then we have the cynical reports of this journalist, Charlie Bloom, the dark, calculated desperation of Erik's chief subordinate, Darius, and even the chaotic eyewitness diary of the steeplechase funmaster, Taffy Jones.
And what stands out immediately, to me at least, is the sheer genius of the premise. You're moving this legendary, heartbroken figure from the dark, Gothic romance environment of the Paris Opera House, which is a symbol of history, secrets, and tragedy, to the relentless, ambitious, steel and concrete world of New York City.
The contrast is just immense.
It's night and day. It sets the stage for a story of pure vengeance, financial obsession, and this dizzying pursuit of power that redefined him completely.
Absolutely. So I think to really understand that transformation, we have to start at the beginning. The real beginning.
Okay, let's unpack this incredible journey. And to do that, we need to anchor ourselves in the foundation, the original story by Gaston Leroux. And it's hard to believe, given its global fame now, that the Phantom's original book was not an instant smash hit. Not even close.
It's one of the great historical ironies of literature, isn't it? We have this perception today that the Phantom of the Opera always existed on the same pedestal as, universally recognized works like Dracula or Frankenstein.
Right, that it was always part of the canon.
Exactly. But when Leroux's initial volume emerged in 1911, it was, at best, a minor curiosity. It enjoyed a brief serialization, but it quickly fell into what the sources describe as virtual oblivion. It was seen as unevenly plotted, highly melodramatic. Culturally, Leroux was just, he was no Victor Hugo.
So its immortality came not from the pen of its author, but from a total beautiful accident, a fluke, as the source calls it, that happened 11 years after publication.
Precisely. And that fluke was Karl Laemmle. He was this shrewd former German immigrant who had become the president of Universal Motion Pictures in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And the story goes that he took a vacation to Paris around 1922.
Okay.
And like any tourist, he was just completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the Palais Garnier, the Paris Opera House. He happened to meet Leroux, who gifted him a copy of the disregarded 1911 book. And Laemmle, sensing this huge dramatic opportunity, read it through in a single night.
And he was facing a very specific commercial problem, or as he saw it, a massive opportunity. Universal was already deeply committed to filming The Hunchback of Notre Dame as a vehicle for their unique, strangely expressive star actor, Lon Chaney.
The man of 1,000 faces.
That's him. And Laemmle immediately saw the Phantom as the perfect next vehicle for Chaney, a figure equally disfigured, equally repulsive in appearance, but fundamentally deeply tragic in his isolation.
And turning it into a silent horror film, rather than the operatic romance it was, that was a massive commercial gamble that paid off spectacularly. The resulting movie in 1925 was a huge success. The sources detail how Laemmle executed this masterly PR coup.
Oh, this is the best part.
It's amazing. Women were reported to have screamed and fainted in the audience. And get this, smelling salts were made available free in the foyer.
That is brilliant marketing.
It's genius. And that film far more than the original forgotten book, caught the public imagination and permanently cemented the Phantom as a horror icon.
That commercial success also left this incredible, indelible mark on Hollywood history. The sources note that the universal replica of the Paris opera set, which had to be built with massive steel girders set in concrete to support hundreds of extras and extensive lighting, it still stands on stage 28 to this day.
Think about that for a moment. A soundstage in California holds the concrete and steel foundation of this French Gothic fantasy. It's just a staggering example of how Hollywood can create a physical reality for a fictional legend.
But the story then had another, maybe even more significant correction in the mid-1980s, and this shifted the focus entirely back toward the tragedy that LaRue had hinted at.
Right, and that was Andrew Lloyd Webber's defining moment. Initially, he was spurred to action after seeing what he described as a very camp version of the story in London in 1984.
Oh,
He was disappointed, but intrigued.
okay.
So 9 months later, he's in a secondhand New York bookstore, and by pure chance, he stumbles upon an English translation of LaRue's original complete work.
And here's where his personal insight proved so transformative. Lloyd Webber's acute perception, which really forms the basis of the modern phenomenon, was that the story was fundamentally not horror, but a truly tragic tale of obsessive but unrequited love.
He went back to the source.
He went right back to the source, intentionally smoothing over LaRue's unnecessary illogicalities and cruelties, and he just extracted that intense emotional core that made the musical the global, enduring success that it is.
And to truly appreciate the scale of Erik's legend, though, we have to spend a little more time on the stage where it all began, the Paris Opera House. The sources really emphasize this point, that the Phantom, as a creature who could disappear entirely, he could not have existed in any other theater in the world.
And the building's dramatic existence was born, ironically, from violence. It was triggered by the 1858 assassination attempt on Napoleon III, who barely survived. After that, he demanded a new grand opera house that would include a reasonably bomb-proof VIP entrance. He wanted security.
Of course. But the architect, Charles Garnier, ran into foundational problems almost immediately that really defined the character of the building. The first diggings revealed this deep, persistent underground stream running right through the site. Haussmann, the city planner, insisted that the prestigious location remain, which forced Garnier to build these massive caisson walls and pump the water out for months.
But the water could never be stopped entirely, right?
Never. The sources explained that while the water was held at bay until construction finished, it eventually crept back in to form a permanent subterranean lake beneath the lowest of the building's massive 7 underground stories.
7 stories, underground.
7 stories of catacombs. This structure is essentially an inverted skyscraper, a vertical city built downward, providing layers and layers of hiding places. And those lower levels had a truly dark history even before Erik moved in.
The Franco-Prussian War.
Exactly. Work halted during the disastrous Franco-Prussian War in 1870, and the revolutionary insurrectionists, the communards, they used the massive shell of the building and its labyrinth of cellars as a base for weapons, powder storage, and, most disturbingly, for holding prisoners.
And the accounts of those times are horrifying. The sources tell us that terrible tortures and executions took place in those vaults, and buried skeletons were still being discovered years later by construction workers.
It was this vast, dark, haunted underground world, already infused with death and despair, that so fascinated LaRue. It made it the absolute perfect sanctuary for a disfigured outcast, desperate for oblivion.
This incredible, unique setting is what housed Erik for years, allowing him to transition from victim to the legendary master of music. Which I guess brings us from the Opera House's physical history to the personal history of the man who chose to hide in its depths.
Right. And for that, we have to turn to that confession.
We pivot the narrative now, moving into the incredibly detailed and personal source material. The dying confession of Antoinette Jury, the mistress of the Corps de Ballet. She is the only living person who truly knew Erik's utterly pitiable origins.
And her account is absolutely critical. It completely reframes Erik's monstrous reputation as one born of profound victimhood. She tells us that Erik Mulheim was born in Alsace, which was then French territory, horribly disfigured from birth.
From the very beginning.
The very beginning. And the sources state that his father was a drunken brute, the local circus carpenter, who saw the child not as a son but as a commodity. He sold him to a traveling freak show. This, not his disfigurement, was his original sin, the brutality inflicted upon him by society.
So he was just a child. How old was he?
He spent 9 brutal years chained in a cage on wheels. 9 years, enduring constant public torment, being pelted with ordure and feces by cruel crowds for their amusement. He was only 16 years old when a menagerie found him in 1882 at a fair in Neuilly.
16, after 9 years in a cage.
Yeah. And Madame Giry, a woman who had seen a lot in her life, she described seeing something that cut through the horror, the pain in those eyes. It was a pain that moved her to what she calls an act of compassion, an act she viewed as essential to her own humanity. She didn't hesitate or deliberate for long.
What did she do?
She returned that night. She used bolt cutters she had stolen from the carpentry shop, found a large cloak from the wardrobe department to cover him, and she simply stole him.
An act of theft that saved a life. The sources are careful to qualify this, right? It was a clear offense in law.
Oh, absolutely a crime. But as her priest later conceded when she confessed, I think not, an offense before God. It was a morally necessary crime. She hid him in her tiny flat for a month, helping him recover from the physical wounds left by the manacles and the years of abuse.
And this is where she learns his story.
Yes, and crucially, she understands that he was not just a victim, but an innate genius. He had developed these remarkable manual skills, watching his father, the carpenter, and by obsessively observing the techniques of illusion, mirrors, and trapdoors used in the sideshows.
Ah, so that's where that comes from.
It's knowledge that he would later exploit with devastating effect. The opera house was his destiny. She brought him there and it became his sanctuary. For 11 years, from 1882 to 1893, he lived in the deep catacombs, essentially undergoing this massive self-education.
He devoured the library.
Devoured the opera's enormous library, primarily focusing on music and opera scores. This is the period when the damaged boy transforms into the master of music. He created his own small world down there. He built his hidden home by the subterranean lake's edge, creating a complex network of secret passages known only to him.
And that unique environment is what allowed the legend of the unseen, omniscient phantom to flourish. It gave him the sense of control he had never, ever had in the daylight world.
But safety couldn't protect him from the very foolish act that defined his life and became the second tragedy: falling hopelessly in love with Christine Day.
The obsession.
That obsession began when Christine was just a chorus girl under Mag Giry's wing. Erik, having this unmatched musical ear gained from listening to the finest voices in Europe, voice coached her unseen until she became an overnight sensation, shocking all of Paris with the clarity and purity of her singing. He poured his genius into her voice.
And the ultimate dramatic confrontation came when, driven by rage and this catastrophic jealousy over Christine choosing the handsome aristocrat, Raoul de Chagny, Erik abducted her from the stage during a performance of Don Juan Triumphant.
Right, and this act led directly to tragedy. When the tenor Pyongyang was accidentally killed, he was choked while trying to resist.
Which triggered the mob?
It triggered the vengeful mob, descending with torches into the catacombs, determined to end the phantom once and for all. But in a moment of true self-sacrifice, Erik spared the lovers, allowing them to escape and disappearing himself, leaving only a mocking memento for his pursuers.
The famous musical box.
The musical box in the form of a monkey that played the tune Masquerade.
And that detail, the monkey music box, is the narrative hinge of this entire sequel. Erik was gone, fleeing wanted notices, and a price on his head plastered everywhere. And again, Madame Giry was there for him.
She always was. She hid him for 3 months and secured passage on a freighter bound for the New World in mid-January 1894, ensuring his escape from the fate that Paris intended for him.
So he was abandoning tragedy for an entirely different pursuit.
Survival and eventually revenge.
Okay, so the transition from the gothic gloom of the Paris catacombs to the raw, ruthless capitalism of New York is immediate and incredibly harsh. Erik escaped the ship and, in the small hours of a freezing morning, swam to the shingly beach at Gravesend Bay, which is part of Coney Island.
His first steps in America were on the coldest, most desolate sand spit imaginable. I mean, this is far removed from the grand halls of Manhattan. He stumbled upon the nightly encampment of the outcasts of Gravesend Bay, the absolute rejects who could only make a miserable living by gutting and cleaning fish.
And this setting provided the deepest, most shocking relief Erik had ever known. He had hardly ever laughed in his life, but that night, the source says he laughed inside himself for sheer relief.
And why?
Because these people, being deformed, scarred, or otherwise unwanted in one way or another, they took no notice of his hideous face. Here, in the lowest strata of American society, he was invisible for the first time. He was just another outcast, a Frenchie, safe from immediate revulsion.
But safety was only the first step. Erik Mulheim was not built to gut fish, The sources are so clear. He was driven by this consuming rage and hatred for the human race that had cast him out and brutalized him as a child.
So he sees an opportunity.
He quickly realized this island, Coney, was a lunatic enclave dedicated entirely to manufactured pleasure, vice, and most importantly, easy fortunes waiting to be fleeced from the bourgeois tourists of New York. He shifted his goal from simple survival to outright exploitation.
But to exploit society, he needed an unscarred face. He needed a representative. His critical move was finding Darius, a physically unscarred, educated, but utterly unscrupulous boy from Malta, 10 years his junior, who was avoiding Ellis Island due to past crimes.
Darius became his indispensable subordinate and his daylight representative. If Erik provided the genius and the dark schemes, Darius provided the face and the ruthless philosophy.
Right.
And Darius taught Erik to worship the one and only true God, the great master who has never let me down, Mammon, the god of gold and greed. This became the driving principle of Erik's new American life, replacing his tragic romantic obsession entirely.
And the genius of Erik, the illusionist, was then applied to his need to move undetected in daylight. His solution was simple but so effective: the clown. He had a custom latex mask made to cover his entire head, and with baggy carnival clothes, he could move through the fun fairs. The sources quote him saying, "The clown outfit was my passport."
He hid in plain sight.
Exactly. He used America's dedication to amusement as his shield.
And the ascent to power was just. It was truly rapid, and based on a succession of highly profitable, ingenious scams, all documented in the sources. He started small, using his genius for observing human nature. Take the postcard scam.
Okay, what was that?
He bought postcards for 1 cent, secretly stamped them postage paid, and sold them to naive tourists for 2 cents, knowing that postage was free anyway. Tourists sent 250,000 postcards weekly.
So Erik netted a massive silent profit from a single-cent margin. That's incredible.
And then he leveraged his knowledge of illusion, trapdoors, and engineering into the amusement park franchises. He designed 6 unique, highly deceptive rides for Paul Boyton's Sea Lion Park in 1895.
But instead of taking a one-off payment,
Which a naive partner would do, yeah. He demanded a 10% franchise fee on the gross take for an entire decade. He replicated this for George Tilyou's Steeplechase Park in 1897, bringing in an astonishing $1,000 a day in pure cash from gullible visitors.
$1,000 a day in 1897.
In cash. But the true marker of his ruthlessness and his full embrace of Mammon was the fixed boxing fights. In 1899, Erik and Darius's joint fortune was substantial, $250,000. Erik decided to gamble all of it.
All of it?
All of it, on the highly anticipated Jeffries against Fitzsimmons world heavyweight title fight.
Okay, wait, I need to know the mechanics of that. How do you ensure the champion loses a fight like that, especially when the consequences for getting caught are lethal? How did Darius pull that off?
It was simple, highly targeted infiltration. Darius, posing as a legitimate sports reporter, used his cover to gain access to the back rooms. He didn't have to fight Jeffries. He simply switched Fitzsimmons' water bottle with one he had laced heavily with a powerful, fast-acting sedative just before the key rounds.
No.
Fitzsimmons was knocked out cold almost immediately by Jeffries. Erik collected $1 million. He then netted $2 million doing the same thing, switching the water bottle of sailor Tom Sharkey in a subsequent fight. He was utterly unstoppable because he never relied on chance. He relied on scientific sabotage and meticulous planning.
So he moved from being a masked figure coaching a single soprano to becoming an invisible financier who could manipulate global sporting events. The ultimate Coney Island strike, which moved him into the legitimate sphere, was Luna Park in 1903.
Yes. His shell company, the EM Corporation, offered the park's founders an unsecured zero-interest loan in exchange for a massive 10% of the gross take. Luna Park grossed $5 million in 4 months. Erik Mulheim, who arrives in America with nothing but the clothes on his back, was now just obscenely wealthy, a capitalist deity operating purely on revenge and greed.
And by 1903, he had outgrown Coney Island's criminal frontier and moved into corporate real estate and the stock exchange. He mastered the markets, investing in coal, steel, railroads, property, operating far beyond the influence of established giants like Pierpont Morgan.
And his physical culmination, the monument to all of this, was the EM Tower. Built in 1904 on Park Row, 40 stories of steel, concrete, and granite, deliberately engineered to be the highest skyscraper in New York at the time.
The symbolism here is just so profound we have to linger on it. Erik, the outcast, spent 11 years living 7 stories below ground in the darkness of Paris, despised and hidden.
And now?
And now he inhabits the penthouse suite atop the world, 40 stories high, looking down on the very society that rejected him. The sources say he could walk unmasked in his suite and look down on the city, knowing he had amassed wealth and power beyond the dreams of Croesus. This tower is not just finance, it is a permanent monument to his triumphant vengeance.
It's the ultimate rejection of the dark, Gothic world of the catacombs. He traded tragedy for mammon, becoming the epitome of the ruthless, invisible power broker of the Gilded Age. But as we know, even at the height of his power, this empire, built on pure hatred, was about to be challenged by a ghost from his romantic past.
The trajectory of Erik's life, his vengeance, his avarice, his empire building, it changed instantly and irrevocably in October 1906 with the delivery of a single piece of paper. The letter, the final confession, from the dying Antoinette Curie.
And the delivery mechanism itself, it tells us a great deal about Erik's isolation. The notary, Armand Dufour, tasked with finding Erik, was completely lost in New York. He failed to find him through traditional means like immigration or police records, noting correctly that, disfigured immigrants were likely rejected or never formally processed.
So how did he find him?
It was only the sharp nose of that journalist, Charlie Bloom, spotting the initials EM1 on the impossibly tall skyscraper, who connected the secretive EM Corporation to the name Erik Mulheim.
Wow. And when Erik finally read the letter, it contained a truth so shattering, it instantly destroyed the carefully constructed walls around his heart. Christine de Chagny's son, Pierre, was his biological child.
Right. And Raoul de Chagny, described movingly as a good, kind, and decent man, had raised Pierre as his own, marrying Christine after she was found with child.
The sources quote Erik immediately confessing that this news changed my life again, filling him with this agonizing self-doubt. The great question that instantly eclipsed his billions was I right to open all the old wounds again?
His emotional isolation was just destroyed by a sudden, violent injection of paternity.
And it seems his new purpose, replacing the pursuit of more wealth, quickly became focused on a single project, which the sources call his one and single indulgence. This project was specifically not dedicated to making more money.
No, it was to the extraction of revenge and the resurrection of his obsession. This was the Manhattan Opera House.
So the revenge was initially social, a precise strike against the New York society that mirrored the cruel crowds of his youth. Erik had been snubbed by the powerful Met Committee, dominated by the unforgiving Mrs. Astor and the damnable 400.
Right. When he sought a screen box, they demanded he appear in person. The Invisible Man was refused the one thing his wealth couldn't buy him, acceptance. They will pay for that insult, he swore.
So he poured his limitless resources into becoming the invisible partner to the tobacco millionaire Oscar Hammerstein to build the rival Manhattan Opera House on West 34th Street. The scale of the funding was just astronomical, intended purely to wipe the floor with the Met. He was now turning his vast, ill-gotten fortune into a weapon against the very social structure of New York.
And the next phase was the phantom financier, orchestrating the prima donna coup. He used massive sums to entice the world's greatest singers away from the established Met. We get this incredible specific detail about Nellie Melba, who had always and steadfastly refused to cross the Atlantic.
So how did they finally get her?
The sources describe this fantastic moment of pure, shocking American capitalism. Hammerstein finally secured Melba after he literally threw $20,000 in French francs onto her Persian carpet at Garnier's Grand Hotel in Paris, agreeing to $3,000 a night, an unprecedented sum.
That is just insane. But following Madame Curie's letter, Erik's obsession shifted instantly from Melba to his past love.
Immediately, he sent a frantic message to Hammerstein to secure Christine de Chagny, described as Melba's only rival, a younger and stunningly beautiful French aristocrat.
And what's crucial here is that the money was meaningless to Christine. She had complete immunity to the lure of the dollar bill. She agreed to the contract not for the finances,
but for the art. It was because the sheer beauty of the new opera's handwritten lyric and score. She was lured by his art, not his gold.
This leads directly to the awesome risk, utterly unheard of, demanded by the invisible paymaster. He insisted on replacing the planned inaugural opera, I think it was I Puritani, with a completely new, anonymous work, The Angel of Shiloh.
A vehicle designed entirely by Erik. A musical confession about his own life, though only he knew it. This required a level of creative control that no financier had ever demanded before.
So the stage is set for this collision between Erik's romantic past and his commercial present. And the arrival of Christine in New York immediately activates Erik, and critically, it alarms his fiercely ambitious and treacherous subordinate Darius.
Right. And meanwhile, you have the journalist Charlie Bloom starting to diligently connect the dots. Completely unaware he is watching a tragedy unfold.
Broom was there at Christine's arrival on November 28, 1906, and he got his first real clue, though he didn't recognize it at the time. He saw the phantom again, a tall man in a cloak and mask standing atop a warehouse at Pier 42, watching Christine disembark.
And Bloom, ever the opportunist, secured his exclusive interview with Christine later that evening at the Waldorf Astoria by playing the gentleman, throwing his old, tattered opera cape over a pool of slush for her to cross.
And during that interview, the innocent yet profound clue is revealed.
A monkey.
The clue was a simple, anonymous gift given to Pierre, the monkey music box. Upon hearing the familiar mocking tune, Christine screamed, "Masquerade! He must be here!" Bloom immediately recognized the significance and traced the monkey to SC Toys at Steeplechase Park, a place he knew well, known for optical illusions, tricks, trapdoors, secret passages. Erik had left his calling card.
And this renewed public interest in Erik's personal life alarms Darius, who has built his entire ambition on inheriting Erik's billions. And we get this extraordinary insight into Darius's mindset in his deeply disturbing segment, The Trance of Darius, which defines his purpose.
So let's pause here and talk about Mammon. Darius is a devotee of the god of greed. What does that truly imply for his motivations?
It implies a philosophy where human life is just a means to an end, and gold is the only moral good. Darius expresses fear that Erik's new obsession with opera and this mysterious son might distract him and lead him to leave his vast fortune to a foundation dedicated to his wretched obsession with opera, thus utterly destroying Darius's inheritance.
Right.
And in his trance, Mammon dictates a flat order. Darius is talented, but Erik is a true wealth-creating genius. However, if Darius should perceive a real threat to his inheritance, he is ordered to destroy that threat without mercy or delay.
And the threat is undeniably Pierre. The single word, inheritance, transforms Darius from an ambitious subordinate into a potential assassin.
Absolutely. And the confrontation is set for December 1st, 1906, at the very scene of Erik's financial success, Coney Island. Christine visits Steeplechase Park, accompanied by Pierre and his tutor, Father Joe Kilfoyle.
The funmaster, Taffy Jones, details this chaotic atmosphere. He was forced to rely on an unexpected helper, the man calling himself Malta, who is Darius, to staff the toy shop.
And Darius used this opportunity to quietly, insidiously interrogate Pierre about his parentage, conferring that the boy was indeed Erik's heir and the direct threat to his future.
And this is where the spiritual warfare becomes personal and physical. Father Joe Kilfoyle, the perceptive Irish priest, instantly sensed an aura of evil about Darius. It was a primal recognition. He instinctively made the sign of the cross, the first of two intense confrontations between the forces of good and evil in this saga.
And the dramatic core, where all the secrets converge, happens in the Hall of Mirrors. Taffy Jones tried desperately to guide Christine through the maze, but the controls mysteriously went out of his control, moving the mirrors on their own, trapping Christine in a central room. Erik appeared, having entered via a secret passage known only to him.
And this is where the critical betrayal occurs. Taffy Jones then witnessed the ultimate treachery. Darius, as Malta, was crouched just outside, listening through a hairline crack separating two mirrors. He overheard the entire emotional confession.
The tragedy here is just immense. Erik had finally secured a private meeting with the woman he loved, only to have his mortal enemy eavesdrop on his deepest vulnerability. The ensuing dialogue is a mix of pleading and broken romance. Erik confessed his unending love and acceptance of rejection. "My heart has been broken so many times." Then he made his demand his sole reason for resurrecting his life. "Leave me, my boy, my son, our son Pierre."
And Christine, pale and shaken but resolute, she made a firm promise. She would wait 5 years until Pierre was 18 to tell him the truth, after which he would be free to choose his father.
Erik accepted this, though bitterly. "I will wait. I've waited so long for one tiny fragment of the happiness most men can learn at their father's knee."
But the seeds of tragedy were already sown. We know from the sources that Darius overheard this entire conversation, and as Christine emerged, Erik was seen muttering near the fence, utterly rejecting the delay and the compromise. 5 years. Never. He's mine, and I will have him with me.
The Phantom, the great planner, refused to leave his fate to chance again.
And more importantly, Darius, having overheard everything, now had his orders from Mammon confirmed. His inheritance was at stake.
The son must be destroyed.
And this is where we need to address that crucial linguistic clue the critique mentioned. When Darius ran past the funmaster earlier, he muttered a phrase in Latin, which reporter Shally Bloom, who was always lurking, scribbled down. That phrase was delenda est filius.
The son must be destroyed. It's not just a general threat, it's the direct, chilling order given by Darius's god of greed. And we, the listener, we feel that dread, knowing that this cryptic phrase is now the core motivation of a trained assassin working for an invisible billionaire.
The dramatic tension culminates less than a week later with the triumph of the opera on December 3rd, 1906. The Angel of Shiloh premiered to an unmitigated triumph at the Manhattan Opera House.
And the audience was packed with New York high societies, the Mellons, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, all of them witnessing a performance funded by the very man they had excluded.
And the opera itself was this masterful piece of self-revelation, a vehicle for Erik's final confession. Its plot mirrors his own life. A handsome Union officer, Captain Regan, is terribly disfigured by an explosion, driving him to despair and isolation. The sources noted that not a dry eye was left in the house because of its intense emotional resonance.
Then came the truly unbelievable phantom-like staging. The original tenor, David Melrose, was incapacitated just before Act 3 by a contaminated linctus, a poisoning engineered by Erik's people. This forced an unlisted understudy,
Erik?
who was, of course, Erik, wearing the full bandages and mask of Captain Regan, to sing the lead role opposite Christine.
He performed magnificently, his voice matching the great Gonchi himself, proving that he could still command the public eye, even masked. The emotional climax arrived when Christine sang the heart-wrenching aria, "Will We Never Meet Again?"
And in that moment, the masked man on stage gave her back the betrothal ring they had shared years ago. It was their final, beautiful farewell, played out publicly, an expression of love and loss that only they understood, hidden in the guise of dramatic theater.
Following the performance, at the celebratory party, we have this incredible cultural mashup, a moment you absolutely have to pause on. President Teddy Roosevelt, Buffalo Bill, and Sitting Bull were all present, illustrating the chaotic, grand scale of Gilded Age celebrity.
Amidst this chaos, Erik made his last veiled appearance. Still in costume and mask, he appeared in the stage mansion doorway, whispered to Pierre, and passed Christine a small, folded note before vanishing permanently from the theater.
And Charlie Bloom, who scavenged the note from a trash can, gives us the final, desperate plea and the location of the fatal rendezvous. "Let me see the boy just once. Let me say one last farewell, please. The day you sail away. Dawn. Battery Park. Erik."
Christine went to this dawn meeting alone with Pierre on December 10th, tragically deceiving her husband, Raoul, and Father Joe Kilfoyle, believing she could manage this final farewell herself.
And this is where we see the payoff of the seemingly mundane details gathered by the journalist and the priest. Raoul and Father Joe discovered the truth only by a terrible chance. At breakfast, Father Kilfoyle, still suspicious of the man he knew as Darius, grabbed Bloom's celluloid cuff that had been randomly selected for the day.
And there, scrawled on the cuff, he recognized the Latin phrase Bloom had scribbled down when Darius ran past him at Coney Island, Delenda est filius.
"The sun must be destroyed."
And that cryptic phrase finally made chilling, immediate sense.
Yeah.
They knew Pierre was the target, and they raced to Battery Park, knowing they were too late to prevent the meeting.
They arrived just as the assassination attempt was underway. Darius was crouched in the bushes with a long-barreled Navy Colt, determined to shoot Pierre to secure his inheritance and fulfill the orders of Mammon.
He shot. But Christine, in a final, heartbreaking maternal and protective act, turned instantly to embrace Pierre, taking the bullet in her back.
And Erik.
Erik reacted with the practiced speed of a man who had lived by violence. He pulled his tiny derringer from beneath his cloak and fired a single accurate shot, hitting Darius black in the center of his forehead, killing him instantly.
The final tableau vivant is just tragic beyond measure. Christine de Chengny died in Raoul's arms, but not before using her last breath to tell Pierre the truth. "Pierre, this is not really Papa. He has brought you up as his own, but your true father is there."
And Raoul de Chengny, proving himself to be a kind and decent man who prioritized Christine's final wish over his own immense pain, he demonstrated his selfless love. He took the golden ring from Christine's finger and urged Pierre to choose between the man who raised him and the biological father who had loved them both so destructively.
And Pierre, the innocent catalyst, he walked to Erik. He removed his hat and mask, stared without visible shock or revulsion at the horribly disfigured face. Then he placed the golden ring on Erik's finger and embraced him, saying simply, "I want to stay here with you, Father."
The hermit, the monster, the billionaire tyrant built on hatred and revenge, was completely redeemed by the unconditional acceptance of his son. The one person who was physically capable of looking upon him without revulsion was the one who granted him a future defined by peace.
The immediate aftermath of the tragedy saw the city authorities quickly put forward an official story designed to protect the wealthy and powerful. Christine's assassination was attributed to a crazed fanatic himself shot down at the scene of his infamy.
Right, a version that suited everyone's desire for closure and avoided exposing the upper classes to scandal involving a masked billionaire financier.
And the sources detail how the two men who loved Christine dealt with their loss. Raoul de Chagny, the ever-decent husband, retired immediately to Normandy, taking Christine's body back to Brittany, and he never married again. His role as the loving father had ended, replaced by permanent solitude.
And Father Joe Kilfoyle stayed in New York. He founded a remarkably well-endowed refuge and school for the destitute, abused, and unwanted children of the Lower East Side. He refused all preferment, remaining Father Joe, and critically, he never revealed the source of his massive funds.
Funds that we know must have come from the very man he once feared, Erik Mulheim.
And this is where Erik's redemption truly begins to take physical form. For Erik and Pierre Mulheim, this marked the beginning of a new life together, one devoted to correction rather than destruction. During the First World War, father and son changed the family name to erase the tragic German connection of Mulheim.
Pierre completed his schooling and joined his father at the head of the enormous family corporation. And crucially, this corporation shifted its focus dramatically away from fixed fights and speculation.
It became globally famous for its large-scale philanthropy. It created massive charitable foundations and founded a major institution dedicated specifically to the correction of disfigurement and facial injuries, a clear and direct atonement for Erik's own suffering.
He retired, right, to Connecticut.
Erik retired to Connecticut in the 1920s, living out his days with books, music, and painting, attended only by two disfigured war veterans.
And the final detail, the ultimate summation of his character arc. After that day in Battery Park, after being accepted by his son, Erik Mulheim never wore his mask again.
The mask, which was once his protection and his passport, became completely unnecessary once he had been seen and accepted by the one person who mattered.
That is the narrative arc complete. Erik Mulheim, who spent his entire adult life guided by hatred and greed by Mammon and dedicated to exacting revenge, was ultimately saved not by the requited love of a woman, but by the unconditional acceptance and love of his son. That moment of paternal connection granted him a future defined by philanthropy and profound peace.
It's an incredible journey of redemption, from the darkness of the Paris Opera to the ruthless heights of the EM Tower, culminating in a single transformative act of sacrificial love.
So what does this all mean for us, the learner, reading these confidential sources? The epilogue tells us that Erik and Pierre changed their name to a new one that's still widely known and deeply respected in America today. If we accept that Erik Mulheim's massive industrial fortune was built almost entirely on fixed fights, ingenious scams, and pure vengeance against a society that rejected him, only to be redeemed by the love of his son and then deployed in vast philanthropic efforts,
Then that raises an important, deeply American question. What does the origin story of this nameless, incredibly respected American fortune say about the enduring power of philanthropy to launder the often dubious and ruthless origin stories of America's greatest industrial dynasties?
the money, however dirty its source, eventually becomes a force for societal good. It forces us to ask if the ends of redemption truly justify the means of mammon.
Something to think about the next time you hear that
Yes,
name.
indeed. Until the next deep dive, keep digging.
We'll see you soon.